Hello and welcome. In this video, I am about to show you a build progress of a rather unconventional network attached storage computer. This computer uses Unraid software and utilizes a mix of traditional good old spindle hard drives in addition to solid state drives. To be more specific, I am using mechanical hard drives as parity drives while using solid state drives as data storage. If you are a long-time viewer of this channel, you may remember me having all NVMe network attached storage server before. This is an evolution of the very same server. I've come to a conclusion that using SSD as parity drive is a waste of money, since SSD has a limited write cycle. There are probably two major questions in your head right now. Why insist on using SSD and why mix, since the hard drives will severely bottleneck the whole RAID array? Before answering those questions, let's look at the case I am going to use. You can find these on AliExpress at around 100 Canadian bucks. It's only 4.5 liters and can support 2 hard drives. Now, I can give you my first reason for mixing both HDD and SSD. It's the size. I am going to be using the mechanical hard drives as parity drives. And SSD, especially NVMe, takes very little space. I can put 3 NVMe drives in this case, resulting in 12 terabytes of safe storage with 2 parity drives, while reducing overall footprint required. My second reason for mixing HDD and SSD is to save the SSD. A single parity check means a write to all available cells in a SSD. If it's a 4 terabyte drive, a parity check will use up 4 terabytes writes. And Unraid recommends regular parity check. By using far slower HDD as parity drives, I am not wearing down NVMe drives unnecessarily. You may still scream at me for intentionally bottlenecking the array speed by using HDD, since an array operates at speed of the slowest drive. You are not wrong, but the HDD parity drives will affect only write speed. The primary purpose of storage server is to store files. Once you transfer files you desire, those files will be read from time to time. As long as you are just reading files off your Unraid server, you will enjoy SSD speeds. And here is a major benefit, and my third reason for mixing HDD and SSD. When you run a parity check, all HDD arrays will crawl if you try to read files off your server. Basically, while you run a parity check, your Unraid server will be unavailable. And a 10 terabyte parity check takes over 24 hours. With my setup of HDD as parity and SSD as storage, a parity check becomes a background process which you won't need to worry about at all, since the SSD part will have more than enough available I/O to handle the low parity check speed. You will be able to use your server as usual and not worry about severely slowing down the parity check. Such is my conclusion after trying to make my Unraid server smaller and more power efficient. Anyway, you may have noticed that I am struggling with the HDD caddies here. They don't seem to be made for 2.5-inch drives, so I am in a bit of a trouble. I do plan to eventually upgrade these hard drives to more robust and faster enterprise hard drives, but with prices for everything shooting up, I don't plan to make the transition anytime soon. In the end, I chose to use silicone double-sided tape to secure the hard drives. These are sticky as hell, and they will secure the hard drives for the time being until I replace them. There are those who use insanely overpowered CPUs for their storage servers. In my own experience though, a low-power CPU such as Intel N100 and N97 featured here is the ideal candidate if you are looking to run a pure storage server. You don't need much RAM for a storage server either. In fact, 4 GB is enough. Sadly, this motherboard accepts only DDR5 RAM, and the minimum capacity for DDR5 is 8 GB. I happen to have a 16 GB DDR5 stick, all thanks to being a tech YouTuber, so that's what it has got. Now, you are looking at a Pico power supply. These come in 2 flavors in general. One is for 12 volts input, the other is for 19 volts input. What you are looking at is a 19-volt version. Unfortunately, I ran into a clearance issue and was forced to use a 12-volt version. I must make it clear that neither has an advantage over another. You choose whatever works for you. The build is almost done at this point, and I must point out that I want all NVMe drives to be easily accessible like this. Some consumer motherboards have a NVMe slot on the bottom of the motherboard, and it's the worst location to be unless you pay extra attention and use thermal pads to spread the heat generated by the drive. It's probably important to mention that you should absolutely use very short SATA cables for this. Using short cables will make this so much easier. You do have to spend a bit for such short cables, but it will be worth it. Trust me on this. As I close this case, only final touches remain. Since this is going to be a server, I am not going to need to bother with any USB cables, so I am going to leave them be disconnected. I also want to connect just power switch cable, since I do not want any unnecessarily lights on this thing. You want a server to be as discreet as possible with the lowest possible noise. As I mentioned earlier, I am sort of gluing the hard drives. This is only a temporary solution. I will eventually replace these with 3.5-inch hard drives. The whole build will use very little power. The Pico power supply is capable of 160 watts, but it needs to be backed up by its AC to DC power adapter. I am going to use 120 watts adapter. Theoretically, the whole rig should use far less than half of that. And this is another small advantage for 2.5-inch drives. They use far less power compared to 3.5-inch drives. And this is also why I am not adding any extra fans. It shouldn't need any. It booted up without an issue, and you can see how little power it uses. Even a slow CPU like N97 it will hardly ever use 25% of its processing power. Only during a data rebuild, it may use up to 50%. It uses less than 1 GB of RAM as well. As for its power consumption, it's reading between 20 to 30 watts from the wall socket. At this power consumption level, I get a feeling that I could get away with a passive CPU heatsink. Well, the video is almost done, so let's wrap this up. I've been using this HDD plus SSD network attached storage system for a little over a month now, and I've done 2 parity checks while using the system. Using the system during a parity check will not slow anything down, and that is the primary benefit of this system. I've done an intentional data rebuild of a NVMe drive as well. It won't also affect its system performance either, since its speed is bottlenecked by the HDDs at maximum speed of about 120 megabytes per second. This bottleneck exists only when parity drive is involved. You will enjoy SSD speed when reading or copying files off the system. Some of you may remember SSHD or solid state hybrid drive. It's a hard drive that has a sizable SSD cache to act as a buffer to store frequently used files. It's not in production anymore. This system is sort of that in concept, but the roles are reversed. SSD part is doing the file storage with HDD acting as a failsafe for file integrity. Well, that is it for this video. I will upload another video if anything worthwhile happens to this. Thank you for watching.